For these examples, we want to sketch the reference triangle of the given angle and find its reference angle. So when you're looking at these, one thing I want to know is we're now going to focus in on angles strictly between 0 degrees and 360 degrees. So there's going to be no need to solve for coterminal angles here. We're just going to work with sketching the reference triangle and finding its reference angle. So for number 1, we want to sketch the reference triangle of 125 degrees. So when we do that, the first thing we need to figure out is what quadrant does the terminal side land in? So don't forget, when we sketch angles, it always has an initial side that starts at 0 degrees, and the terminal side will open up to whatever angle measure we have. So for 125 degrees, you could probably tell that it will land somewhere between 90 and 180 degrees. So we know that we're going to work in quadrant 2. Now when we sketch these terminal sides, it's okay if it's not absolutely precise, as long as we can sort of make an estimate of where this terminal side would land. So if we were to open up 125 degrees from 0, I'm going to try to sketch this one out. So let this blue line be the terminal side of 125. It would open all the way up to about here. So that means from 0 to this is 125 degrees. In order to draw the reference triangle, all we have to do is take that terminal end and drop it down to our x-axis. So this right here is our reference triangle. The reference triangle is always going to form a right angle with our x-axis. And we can also identify our reference angle between the terminal side and our x-axis. All right, so we were able to sketch the reference triangle. Now all that's left to do is identify that reference angle. Let's use the letter theta for that angle measure. So to find the reference angle theta, since we are in quadrant 2, all we need to do is take 180 minus this angle measure here. So this would be 180 minus 125. All right, so when we do that, and you can use your calculator if you need it, this will give us a reference angle of 55 degrees. So we could say that 125 degrees has a reference angle of 55 degrees, aka it's 55 degrees away from the x-axis. So if you want, you can sort of change that theta to be 55 degrees. All right, so there are a couple of things that I want to note here. Again, it's super important that we're able to identify which quadrant the angle lands in. And it's also important to note how that reference angle is sketched. If you ended up drawing a triangle that looks like this, okay, that's wrong. We don't like those. Those reference triangles do nothing for us. They're not even called reference triangles. They're called fake triangles. I don't know. But when we draw these reference triangles, make sure it's always hugging the x-axis. For number 2, we want to find the reference triangle for 205 degrees and the associated reference angle. So let's go. Now, thinking of 205 degrees, you could probably tell that it's between 180 and 270. So if we draw that terminal side of 205 degrees, again, I'm going to sort of illustrate how that would open up from 0. So let's say this is our terminal side. To open up to 205, it would land somewhere around here. So 205 degrees will definitely land in quadrant 3. All right. Now, we want to go ahead and sketch the reference triangle. So again, it's always going to hug the x-axis. If you draw something like this, that's wrong. The reference triangle here will look like this, forming a right angle with the x-axis. Once you see that right angle with the x-axis, you know you drew your reference triangle correctly. All right, so next we can go ahead and figure out what is the reference angle here between the terminal side and the x-axis. I'll use theta again to represent the reference angle. So when we find the reference angle for 205 degrees, since we are in quadrant 3, all we have to do is take the larger angle, 205, minus the angle on our x-axis, which is 180. Because when we do that, that will give us that angle measure illustrated right there. So when we solve 205 minus 180, you get 25 degrees. So this tells us that our reference angle for 205 is going to be 25 degrees.